Good evening. My name is Gregory Eisenberg, co-founder, president, and tonight moderator for the Commission on Local Debates. We'd like to start by thanking our co-partners for tonight's debate, the League of Women Voters of Orange County and the University of Central Florida's Lou Frye Institute. We'd also like to thank our most important guests for this evening, yourselves, the voters. Our questions are written and approved by a bipartisan panel of Republicans, Democrats, and non-party affiliated voters, and they were written to provide you with real answers to your questions before Election Day. So let's get started. Tonight's debate is between Vicki Elaine Felder and Michael Mike Scott, candidates running for Orange County School Board in District 5. District 5 covers central Orange County, including Washington Shores, Pine Hills, and Tangelo Park. Orange County is the United States' 8th largest school district with over 210,000 students, and school board members serve for 4 years. We'll let the candidates introduce themselves. They each have 2 minutes, and please use this time to tell us about your background and your qualifications. Ms. Felder, we will start with you.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. I am Vicki Elaine Felder, and let me thank you for the invitation, and good evening to those persons who are listening and taking part in this debate. I am Vicki Elaine Felder, and I have been a lifelong resident in the Washington Shores area. I call it beautiful Washington Shores, this community, for all of my life, which is where District 5 is. I have learned in my 40 years as an educator that education really is a labor of love, and my greatest reward has been the success of my students. Why am I running? My depth of knowledge and experience is essential, I believe, to provide the school board with a much needed perspective that has stood the test of time. The community in which we live in, where I live, needs someone with pure intent, whose tenure proves that they are here for the long haul, to represent students, parents, teachers, staff, and the community. I am ready. I am ready to be that voice for District 5. Remember the 2 V's, vote Vicki, the educator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Felder. And Mr. Scott, 2 minutes for yourself to introduce yourself.
Hi, so my name is Mike Scott. I'm from Orlando, Florida, born and raised here. I'm running kind of in 2 parts. One is personal and the other is professional. As a father of a young man, I've seen struggles in my son, but I've also seen gains, and those gains came from good teachers and good family support. As an ESE student in Orange County Public Schools, I struggled. I mean, I really struggled, elementary, middle, high school, but I had an IEP, which is an individual education plan, and I had resources to be able to get through the finish line, and I did it without medication. As I became a father and noticed that my son had some of the similar challenges, teachers were advocates of medicating him, and did you get him diagnosed, and has he been evaluated? And I'm fortunate that my son has, moved on to high school this year, but he did that without medicine. He had a good father, a good mom, and good teachers. I think that it's important that the teachers understand that there are more things that happen that impact our kids. That's why mental health is an important thing for me. It's one that I champion, because if you can get the mental health right, the academics will come, the behavior will come, the respect will come, the safety will come. And that's the biggest thing. I haven't seen much change from the time that I was in school about 20 years ago until now. The school board is supposed to represent all people and be reflective of the people that it represents. That isn't the case. My opponent will probably bring a great voice to the school board, but that voice is already there. It has 3 former teachers, 2 former elected officials, and a mayor and a state representative. And when we talk about things that we inspire our kids to be, things that we want to see, we should have a school board as a reflective of all people in the community. And I believe I am that reflection, having overcame many challenges. So my name is Mike Scott. I am running for school board, and I look forward to sharing more ideas about my candidacy with you all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. And again, thank you both for being here. It's really important to have these messages reach the voters before Election Day, and we really appreciate the time that you've been dedicating to your campaigns. Candidates are going to have 90 seconds to respond to each question, 30 seconds for rebuttals. Based on the results of a coin toss before we went on camera, Ms. Felder, you will go first. Our first question for you is,
Excuse me, I wanted to rebuttal what he said. Is that okay? Or do I need to wait?
if you wait just right this second, we're going to get to the first question. That's a little broad, and that it should allow you to answer.
Okay.
And you need to rebut.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
What do you see as the primary work of the school board to address the challenges facing District 5?
All right. One of the challenges that I know that the school board would have with District 5 is the challenge of making sure that there's equity. Sometimes that's difficult when you have a community that may not feel that they have been invited to the table. And I think because of my experience as a teacher, and I've taught a varied, diversified group of students who had IEPs, those who were AP students, and those who were average, and those who were honors. And I've had the opportunity to interact with their parents and their families, their guardians. So I've been there 40 years. So I've had a very good understanding of bringing a broad perspective to the school board without having been a student who was an IEP student. Also, I think that what I would like to see my District 5 do, I'd like to have closer relationship with the parents, community members, with the school board, and they not feel like they're an outside. Some of the great concerns they have even now, and I'm sure you are going to address that later on, is COVID-19, and some of the parents don't want the kids to go to school. Some of the parents feel like they have to go to school because they're essential workers. They can't keep them. So I would like to be that advocate, that voice, to be able to bring that piece of the puzzle together, to let them know that the school board is serving as an advocate, not your enemy, not someone who is isolated
Great.
from what you need.
Thank you so much, Ms. Felder. Mr. Scott, over to you. What do you see as the primary work of the school board to address the challenges facing District 5?
I think the primary job of the school board is access and providing information to the students and the families, but not only providing that information, explaining how that information specifically impacts a particular family or group of families. My opponent talks about, equity. Equity is everybody having an vested interest. When you look at the school board in its current makeup, there isn't a young man on there. There's never been a young Black man on there. And those are, just to be candid, a lot of the challenges. A lot of the kids that look like me are, in alternative schools. Some of them are incarcerated at juvenile centers and in alternative schools, and in some cases even at 33rd. And so when I look at my son, I want him to look at someone or a group of people that represent him, that is reflective of him and his experiences. So a larger part of what the school board needs to do is get information to the families, break that information down in ways that they can understand it. You look at how we just started this COVID registration for face-to-face and how it was rushed. I was for the kids going back to school, but it was important to me that they do it safely. And you can't do anything safe if you're rushing. You had, surveys that didn't have languages for all the families, specifically Haitian American families. You had glitches and stuff for families that couldn't get in there. So for me, it's about providing the information, but more importantly, letting them know how that information affects them beyond a school board meeting, beyond a Twitter post or a social media post, really being with the families in their schools and their community centers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. This next question will start off with you. School board member Dr. Kat Gorton represented this district for over 20 years. Do you approve of her overall record or not?
I approve. Dr. Gorton is a fighter for kids and myself included. I was a student under her tenure. One thing that I'm proud of with Ms. Gorton is that, I've worked primarily with young men and women who were incarcerated, teaching them GED, life skills, and being a counselor to them. But probably my biggest accomplishment, aside from them graduating, going to high school, getting whatever they thought was successful in a trade or a job or starting a family, was we were able to do a hybrid graduation of sorts back in 2011, where the kids who got their GED, these are juveniles who were charged with adult crimes, who got their GED in the jail and got released for one reason or another, were able to celebrate, but celebrate in a way that's reflective of a graduation experience. We did graduation ceremonies in the jail, but we were able to have one. It was at Olympia High School, and we partnered that or paired that graduation with GED recipients at Mid-Florida Tech. And that was awesome. And that was only because of Ms. Gordon's leadership that was able to take place. And so I'm grateful to her for that and many other things. But I think she's done a phenomenal job. And I hope to, continue the fight that she started. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Felder, over to you. Do you approve of Dr. Kat Gordon's district running over the last 20 years? Why or why not?
Yes, I do approve. But let me just go back to the fact that there's, because there may not be a male presence on the board, and Mr. Scott remembers, Ron Blocker was a superintendent for many years, and that was a very prominent male presence on the board. And I don't think you need to have a man on a board to determine whether or not they're in the role models. You have teachers, you have administrators, and you have mentors. Even Mr. Scott himself is a mentor. Now let me talk about Dr. Gordon. Dr. Gordon has been an advocate for students before she got on the board because she is an educator. And I think because she's an educator, that makes her apropos for the job on the school board. She has a very good understanding of what children need, of what parents need, and what the community needs. And as an educator, you have that opportunity and you have that ability to make that puzzle fit. So I'm very proud of what she has done. She has fought, even when she had to walk alone, she still was very sure that she wanted to make sure she would be the voice of the people. And the record speaks for itself. She's been there 20 years. So yes, I appreciate her work. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to respond to something that she said. I know Mr. Blocker was the superintendent. He was in fact my superintendent, and I'm friends with his family. I'm friends with his sons. We do actually a blackout fundraiser every holiday. And while Mr. Blocker was the superintendent, he wasn't the elected school board member. So when I talk about, having equity and being fair and representing all people, the board runs the show of sorts. So the school board hires the superintendent and the superintendent carries out the rules and procedures of that board. That they've never had that perspective before. And I think it's important that you have a diverse school board that represents all people. You got to understand the perspective.
Great. And so that actually transitioned us well to our next question, which we'll start with you, Ms. Felder. The school board appoints the district superintendent. Dr. Barbara Jenkins has been in this role since 2012. What policies during her term do you support? Which would you change?
Well, first of all, let me just say this. Dr. Barbara Jenkins is in a very difficult position, simply because she has had to adhere to the governor of Florida's policies and what he requests, and at the same time, she's had to make sure that members of the Orange County Public School system would have some sort of, would be contented. And it's been very difficult, but one of the good things that she's done, we've been the #1 district. She's gotten all kind of accolades for causing Orange County to be a leader in what they've done. I think she's working hard with the budget. One of the things that, and I don't know whether or not I would be able to do anything with that, because again, it trickles down from the governor. And I think she's done as best as she could do with what she had. And one of the things that I like about what she has done, the institution of digital learning. However, even though computers do what they want to do, but suppose we did not have digital learning at all and this pandemic hit, we would have been in bad shape. But because it had already been instituted, because she pushed and encouraged that, then we're able to, teaching and learning can still happen. So I guess one of the things I would be wanting to work with her on is finding more money. Got
it. Thank you, Ms. Felder. Thank you for your response. Mr. Scott will ask you the same question. What policies of Dr. Barbara Jenkins have you supported, and which would you change?
So the policies I support or like or think were pretty good was a couple years ago, this is 2020, so about 3 years ago, the district was very intentional in trying to get those lost kids or lost young people, because you could be 20, 21 and not have a high school diploma. And so they had, hey, go to any school or go to your last school, and we will find a way for you to get you re-enrolled. And I think that was good. I would love to see that continue and promote it a little bit more. The other thing is the shift. Most people, if you're familiar with technical education, the technical centers were Orange Technical Center, Mid-Florida Tech, and Winter Park Tech. And now the name shifted from Technical Center to Orange Technical College. I think that is reflective of the value of those who, for one reason or other, may not go to college, but still want to take up a trade. AC is one, because my AC is broke now. So I certainly appreciate the people that take up that trade. But, those are things that I like, just being more engaged. What I would like to see different is when I was in high school, and it wasn't that long ago, we had driver's ed, we had home economics, we had agriculture. We had things that like the everyday things that some take for granted. So for me, I would love to see more programs and more initiatives that are geared towards helping kids navigate and families navigate things that they're going to encounter in everyday life, as opposed to just a test and a test and a test. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your response. We're going to stick with you for this next question. There has been a push statewide to boost starting teacher salary to $47,500. What is your stance?
I'm for teachers' raises. I think it should be a little bit more. You get what you pay for. And, I would do this work whether I was working in it, whether I was elected or not, because I believe in it. And so for me, I believe that, you pay for things that you believe have value. And, we have teachers that leave at astronomical rates. 60% of teachers leave in about 5 years. And so I think that for me, if you want the teachers to stay, you pay them, and you pay them well, because there's nothing like a good teacher and the impact they have on a kid's life. And I know that just from personal experience. I can remember all my good teachers, all the way going back to Ms. Bateman at Oak Hill Elementary, Mr. Cole, my history teacher at Gotha Middle. So I remember those teachers that made a difference. I remember those teachers that went the extra mile, and they did it because they had a love of the profession. So, if we're going to educate our kids and do it right, we have to invest in our teachers, and that means paying them and paying them their worth.
Ms. Felder, I ask you the same question. How do you feel about the $47,500 starting teacher salary and about putting that in place?
Well, I think that teacher salary should be competitive, because teaching is a profession. And if you look at it from that perspective, then money should not be a problem. I think those teachers who have been teaching for 10, 12, 15, 20 years, some of them are now at 47. And so I think that those teachers that have already been there, that's the salary that needs to be increased. And then, of course, when you're trying to draw teachers in, you're going to need to pay them more, because the cost of living has gone up. We're in a pandemic, and I don't know how long the pandemic is going to last. So having teachers coming in, they're going to need a competitive salary. So I believe that teachers are worth the pay. They should be paid for their worth. And there are teachers who would do it probably because they love it. But then we have to be realistic. They have to make a living. They have to live, and they have to survive. So the salary needs to be competitive.
Great. Thank you for your response. We're going to stick with you for this next question, Ms. Felder.
Mm-hmm.
What are your strategies for communication among and receiving meaningful input on issues from district leaders, school employees, and parents, especially regarding COVID-19?
All right. Well, I've started doing some things because I'm a teacher. One of the strategies I would have, first of all, I'd want to connect with city officials. And I would also like to connect with social service workers, because with some children who are at home, and then those that are going to school, they may live in families that have just not just a parent, but maybe living with their grandparents or extended families, and they may have underlying conditions. And I know people are very personal about their home and their space in their home. But if students are still going out, because seemingly every other week or every 2 weeks, there's a shutdown because somebody, some kid or some teacher or some coach has contracted COVID-19. So if you could make sure that the children would be safe, even if they're at home learning, I think that social services needs to be a part of this equation, along with the city commissioners and our state officials, because that's where you would have access to maybe funding. We have a foundation for the Orange County School Board and those business people. I'd want to make a connection with them, the community, and social services, and our political leaders, so that we can become one entity working together for the better good.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Felder. Mr. Scott, over to you. What are your strategies for communication among and receiving meaningful input on issues from district leaders, school employees, and parents, especially regarding COVID-19?
So just in general, be available and accessible, or as the kids say, pull up. I think that there are a lot of meetings that just happen organically because of the nature of the work. Like I would take the bus drivers and bus monitors. I attended a meeting, this was maybe a year and a half ago. It wasn't a campaign season just because they had some issues. So I think that it's on the school board member to not only, bring the information to the district, to the schools and community centers, but also know where they're meeting. And inviting, asking if they can be invited to speak and share their thoughts and their perspective on what's going on. Because sometimes people don't understand all the nuts and bolts of a decision that a school board is about to make or has made. And I think it's important you show, hey, if this is why we did this, and if we wouldn't have did this, this is what would have happened. So for me, just being available and accessible. As it comes to COVID, phone calls. Like I talk to my parents once a week. And it's really just as simple as, hey, how you doing? Everything going okay? But also for me in the mentoring program, asking them, how the kid is doing, what is it that they need? I have a young man here who is in 6th grade at a middle school here and lost both his parents. And so it shows in the classroom and that he's struggling with that in addition to everything else. So knowing that, some teachers don't know what their kids are going through. So for me, it's engaging the parents in a phone call or an email, but preferably a phone call. Calling, hey, how's everything going? Just checking in. Okay, everything's good. Okay, on to the next. But just carving out some time to check with the families and make sure that they are good.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. This next question is going to go to you. In Orange County, football teams, coaches, and trainers have been getting COVID tests with federal CARES Act funds. Some critics allege revealing test results could be a HIPAA privacy violation, while others are concerned that other students aren't getting COVID tests at the same rate as the football players. Supporters of the policy point to the high contact nature of football and the importance of making sure coaches, who are often also teachers, aren't exposing students to COVID. Do you support testing football teams, coaches, and trainers, or would you make changes to the current process?
I wouldn't make any changes. Like football, just by the nature of the sport, you're going to have, a lot of contact. I mean, it is a contact sport. But that aside, I mean, there's a bond there. There's a fraternal brotherhood of sorts. When they're in their locker room and they're changing, they're talking, practice. So they spent a lot of time. So I think that, testing them on a regular basis is important, and just the frequency of testing, because while they are, isolated during the school, doing things away, when they're out of school, they come into contact with the community. So I think that it's important because of the frequency of contact within a particular school and the fact that they're coming into contact with other schools that we should test them, but also test them at a higher rate. Because if we don't, we'll likely have community transmission. So for me, I think that's the move to make and to continue. I don't see any challenge with it, just because, again, it's with the nature of the sport. They're going to have a lot more contact among one another. So they're more likely to contract it, not know it, and pass it before we catch it, as opposed to kids in a particular group of class that's, going about their business.
Thank you. Ms. Felder, I ask you, do you see HIPAA concerns there? Do you see there being concerns with other students not being tested at the same rate? Do you support testing the football teams, coaches, trainers, or would you make changes to the current process?
Well, I certainly understand the constant testing, because many high school students, athletics is what's going to get them to the next level, give them an opportunity to matriculate in the institution of higher learning. So they need to play a sport along with their academics. And so, and not only that, but sports make money for the school. our athletic programs give a lot to our school in terms of our budget. So that's what we need to make sure that's working well. I'm not against testing children, but I don't know that all of the children, but I don't know whether or not we have the means to do that. It was hard enough when COVID hit for us to be able to get testing for just regular people in the communities. So I don't know whether or not that would be something we could do. However, I am glad that we do have a budget that we can test, and not just football players, when other sports come around, lacrosse and soccer, baseball, swimming, any of those kinds of sports that come around, because as I said earlier, some students, that is their ticket. Volleyball, basketball, that is their ticket to move to an institution of higher learning. So we would want them to remain healthy as best as we could. I wish that we could have more money to test kids daily, but we don't.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Felder.
Mhm.
This next question is for you as well. This school year, there have been at least 11,000 fewer students in Orange County Public Schools than expected, raising concerns about layoffs and program cuts. Do you think these are legitimate concerns? And if so, how would you respond to your constituents, district parents, and school employees about these concerns?
Well,
Was
okay.
I'm sorry, that is Ms. Felder. The
Oh,
question.
okay. My apologies. Okay, I'm sorry.
First of all, I'd have to know within my district what were some of the issues in terms of students the percentage of students that are not going to school, because that could be a myriad of reasons as to why. Hopefully it is not students that are school age and they've just chosen to drop out. That is when, as a school board member, that I want to institute or at least check around the district to make sure that there are programs that would be of interest to students who have, for some reason, no longer are interested in coming to school. So training programs, vocations. I am an advocate of vocations. My father owned a dry cleaning business and my mother was a teacher, and that is how I got to college. So I am very much in favor of finding programs that will keep students interested and keep them in school. And of course, as I looked at the percentage within the district, to find out how many students are not engaged in terms of in any type of program, then I'd have to work from their perspective before I could tell you exactly what I would do. But I certainly would want to encourage programs at the schools within my district so that children would remain in school and do what they could to learn a trade, learn some academics that could move them to another level so they could be self-sufficient.
Great. Thank you for your response, Ms. Felder. Mr. Scott, I ask you the same question. With the fewer students and raising concerns about layoffs and program cuts, do you think that these are legitimate concerns? And how would you respond to the constituents, district parents, and school employees about these concerns?
Absolutely, they are legitimate concerns when it comes to layoffs. You want to know that you have a job when for the next couple of weeks or next couple of months or next year. Job security is important to people, especially if you have families and mouths to feed. For me, I'm going to fight. Orange County has a robust reserve system, well over 90 million last time I looked at it. And we have CARES money to pay for PPE and other options. So I'd say it's a no. As I see it right now, there isn't any reason to lay off, even with the reduction in numbers. So for me, if they had a concern, or if a parent or group said, hey, we're concerned about layoffs, I'm going to check to make sure that the concern is valid. And figure out kind of why or what we can do to move around it. But if not, I'm going to fight for them. Like, they deserve to work. There's no reason to lay people off as it relates to, COVID, because the kids aren't in the classroom. Every teacher, support staff, they have value, and value shows in the product that Orange County Public Schools puts out. So nope, no layoffs, no reduction in hours. There's no reason to do it right now. That may change the next fiscal year, but for now, there's no reason to lay anybody off. And even next fiscal year, again, there's going to be a rebound. And I think the county has significant, I don't think I know, the Orange County has significant reserves to be able to absorb that, and they should.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. This next question is going to be for you as well. Increased funding for school safety, mental health services, and teacher salaries are all hot topic issues in recent years. Given that funding is limited, which areas would you prioritize and which areas would you reduce or cut in the budget for these and other issues?
Mental health, that's my priority. That's my biggest priority. And let me tell you why. As I said in the beginning, when we started this debate, if a kid or a family is going through something at home, that is going to impact how they work, how they interact with other students and even other teachers and staff. So I think that it's important that the school board takes an intentional approach to understand that mental health doesn't mean that, you're crazy or there's something wrong with you. Mental health is teaching you how to deal with a family member or a friend who may have passed away, how to deal with not making the team or not getting the grade that you thought you were going to get on a test, or somebody saying something about you, particularly when it comes to social media. So for me, that's the most important thing, because if we get that right, guess what? Academics are good, behavior is good, safety is taken care of. Because when you look at mass shootings and things, a lot of those there were indicators. There were mental health issues that were like warning signs of sorts to say, hey, something might be wrong here, and somebody missed it. So I think it's important to be intentional. When I ask my son about his day, it's how was your day? Okay, what did you do? How did that make you feel? Why did you feel that way? Have those conversations so they can process those feelings. So for me, that's the important piece. And what I would take money away from, we don't need more guns in schools. We don't need more guns in schools. We have enough. So if I had to trade off and we had to take more money, I would put more money into mental health and less money into bringing multiple officers at some schools where it's not necessary.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Scott. Ms. Felder, I ask you the same question. Given that funding is always limited, which areas would you prioritize and what areas would you reduce or cut in the budget for these and other issues?
Well, I would prioritize safety, because in the last 4 or 5 years, in the last year, we've had massive shootings at schools. And I think with the problems of police brutality that is happening in our country, I think that if we had more police officers who were understanding, and students could have a better relationship with officers, some of that could be curtailed. And of course, it does have to do with a person's mental stability, but you have to get that which is overt first, which you see first, and that's safety. And we need to have better relationships with police officers, because we need policemen. Every one of us, if something happened to us, we would get on the phone and want a police officer to come right now. So I think that I would be putting some money in school safety, and of course the SROs, making sure that there's a right relationship, because many of our boys that look like me, black and brown boys, they have issues with police officers. But if you're with them and you spend time in that teaching, that education is there to show them that all police officers are not the same, then the mental health would get better. It would get better. That's my take on that. Thank you.
Now I have to ask your time, before we could move on to you really quick, Mr. Scott, before your time is up, I just want to ask, what would you cut though? Just quickly, what would you cut in order to make room for that budget?
What would I cut? Probably some of this, maybe some of the curricular activities that may not, we might not need. I just can't see cutting. I don't want to cut salaries. Teachers need to get paid. I definitely don't want to cut from safety, because we need that. So some of the frills that we have, persons that are in positions, that paper pushers, we may not need that. You may need to get in the classroom and teach. You know what I'm saying? That part of the budget may need to get cut.
Got it. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your response.
Yes.
And Mr. Scott, you are in a vote by name, so we cannot unfortunately give a rebuttal for right now.
Okay. All right.
Ms. Felder, this next question is for you. Again, how would you balance district governance overall and school site decision making? There is definitely a balance to be made overall when you are managing an overall district, and when you want to make sure you're down on the ground level, on a site level, making decisions.
Well, first of all, I think before I made any decision regarding the district, it would be ground level, and I would need to be able to access the real need. there are a lot of schools that are may not have the kind of physical look that another school has, or they may be in need for something else, and then maybe the budget, for some reason, there's no more money, or they did not consider that there was a need. And I would have to, I'd want equity across the board for all the schools in my district and for all of the schools in Orange County. All schools should be able to have the same amount of help that the rest of them are having. There should be one district feeling like that they don't have enough, or they're suffering. So when you start ground level and look at the needs, the pertinent needs, and then I would be one of these persons advocating that it's across the board. It's across the board, because I know there's some schools still lack a lot of things that other schools have in Orange County, and the reason is because there's no money. But we need to find how that money can get spread equally across the district.
Great. Thank you for your response, Ms. Felder. And Mr. Scott, I asked you this question, but of course, if you need to use this time for anything else you'd like to address, you are more than welcome to. How would you balance district governance and school site decision-making?
I just wanted to share, I don't want to make it seem like the safety isn't a priority. It is to me. Most schools have a security attendant, a security officer, and an SRO. I don't think they need much more than that. Orange County has its own police force. A lot of people aren't aware of that. And I think the investment should be to grow that police force. And as that police force grows within the district, that you gradually phase out officers who are used to chasing bad guys in the streets, and be purposeful and intentional about the safety and security for people who are bred, for lack of a better word, to protect students in elementary, middle, and high school settings. When it comes to governance and site decision-making, I do it now. I have site supervisors that work for me and work with me. And I think that it's just as simple as having a conversation and saying, hey, what do you need for your particular school with the principals and APs? Because what they may need at one middle school is different from what they need at another. Having those conversations, and more importantly, how can I help you achieve that goal? And saying, hey, well, we're working on this, or this proposal, or this particular policy is going to come down. Do you have any guidance or input on how this may impact you positively or negatively? So for me, it's having those conversations, but also being intentional in the conversations that you have with your principals at any given school site of what works for them, what challenges they face, because of course you're going to make decisions at a global level as a school board member that impacts everyone. But in those decisions you make, you want to make sure they're informed decisions. And the only way you get that information, at least from a site level, is talking with your principals and assistant principals and your leadership on a regular and consistent basis.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And this next question is also going to go to you, Mr. Scott. How do you define success for our students, and how does this differ from the state's definition of success for our students?
I didn't hear that last part. You said, how do I define success? Can you repeat the question?
Sure. How do you define success for our students, and how does this differ from the state's definition of success for our students?
So my definition of success for a student is getting them to the finish line, and that finish line is a high school diploma. I might want a young man or a young lady to go to college or get a trade, but that's the basic thing is getting them from A to B, and that's from elementary through middle, high, and high school, and then into the society where they're contributing. When it comes to the state, speaking up, I think that with COVID, there's a lot of latitude, and then at least for this school year and certainly next school year, to be able to try different things. And that's what I'm about, trying things and not being afraid to fail. I think the school board, in some instances, has been afraid to try a particular test or a particular program with kids for fear that it may impact funding. But if you do something at a school or a group of schools and it works and you're able to scale it up, well then, hey, look, we're doing this, we're piloting this. Hey, state, can we do this? Let me show you how it works. Let me show you your program efficacy. Let me come with this data to prove that, this thing that we're doing here locally in Orange County is not only, working for us, it's thriving, and you should try these in other schools. I think that our school board members need to regularly engage with the Orange County Legislative Delegation, which is the state and House representatives who go to Tallahassee and advocate for the laws that we live under in the state, but talk with them. And just be willing to try things without fear of failure, without fear of losing dollars. It's more than that. So, yeah, getting into high school, and through their goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And Ms. Felder, ask you the same question. How do you define success for our students, and how does this differ from the state's definition of success?
Well, I don't know that it's that different from the state success for students, because we try to have a mission statement that would emulate what the state of Florida has for Orange County Public Schools and for all of the public schools districts within our state. But of course, when a student is able to accomplish a goal, that's success. That goal could be graduation, or that goal could be to enter into a trade program, or that goal could be at 15 being able to go immediately to a job and get a GED and be able to move on, because of extenuating circumstances. They may not can come to school on a regular basis because maybe there are family issues. And especially with COVID-19, there have been a lot of trajectories that have occurred where students school is not going to be school as usual, I think, for a very, very long time. So I think when a student has set a goal and they've achieved that goal, that's success. And only you as a student can define that success. And I think Orange County Public School has a mission statement where they want to encourage students to be successful in whatever they put their hands to do that will move them from point A to point B. And I think that's one of the things that I would like to encourage sitting on the board.
Great, thank you, Ms. Felder.
Mhm.
This question is going to be also for you, Ms. Felder. I'm sure you're asked this a lot. More students and teachers will be returning to the classrooms in October of this month. What, if any, precautions should be taken to ensure the safety of all students and school staff?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And I pray that we take that question to heart. I think that cleanliness, sanitation beyond imagination, and that may mean more salary or more money for those persons who are in charge for keeping the school clean. Discipline measures need to be put in place for those students who are refusing to adhere to the mask wearing, and maybe those employees, who are not able to adhere. And then you may have some students who may be asthmatic or having some issues where they can't wear a mask. Then there needs to be funding, so that we can give them something that they can wear. Not maybe the mask, but this kind of shield. But at all costs, for teachers that are returning and children that are returning, the school has got to be clean by any means necessary. It's got to be clean. And so I believe there's budgets. We have foundation for the Orange County School Board. We have people who are friends of the school district who can help fund if we need that. And we have a governor who sits on funding. Because if you want them to go to school, it must be conducive so they can learn and they not have to make a decision between a paycheck and a death certificate.
Thank you, Ms. Felder. I appreciate that answer. And over to you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Scott, more students and teachers will be returning to the classroom in October this month. What, if any, precautions should be taken to ensure the safety of all students and school staff?
So having more training, because obviously, there's a routine that the teachers and staff have gotten accustomed to at, my schools. And I think that with that, I think that you plan for it. So making sure the staff is trained more, because I have a process or procedure for 10 or 15 kids, but now I have 30 or 60. So making sure that the procedures that were put in place are reinforced, retraining to make sure that they know the proper way to address those things, and just continue doing what they're doing. I think that they're doing the best job that they can, all things considered. But when you add more kids in, it's certainly going to be a little bit more cleaning, a little bit more people in the hallways. And so just being more intentional and making sure, hey, remember that you have to wipe this table this many times. Remember that you need to, in the schools, they have this clean or dirty. So there's a green sign that says clean and a red sign that says dirty, making sure that we turn it over to let people know, has this classroom been clean? And, pulling the kids to a particular bathroom while one area is being clean. So for me, just training and communication, they're doing a great job now. It's just going to be more work as more kids come on, and if we need to, hire more staff. Thank you.
Great.
Can I just say a little, just add to that?
Unfortunately, you weren't evoked by name, but you will have a second to respond in just a bit.
Okay.
Mr. Scott, your next question is, what educational innovations outside our district would you bring to Central Florida? You're on mute. I'm sorry. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, so I'm sorry about that.
No problem. What educational innovations outside of your district would you bring to Central Florida and into your district?
So for me, I shared before, we gotta have a way to address the kids that don't sit still. It's great, we're a leading school district and we're doing things, but that's if everything is going right. What are we doing for the kids that don't sit still, that get in trouble? If a kid, for example, may steal a teacher's purse, are we going to immediately call the police and put him in jail, or ask, hey, well, why did you steal the teacher's purse? What's going on? Are you homeless? Are you hungry? What's going on? So for me, being innovative is being engaging, asking our families, our staff, our teachers, just everyone, what the pulse is, temperature checks on a regular basis. I would think that continuing the drop back in programs for those kids that are lost. Right now, I think it should be a quest of sorts to find out, okay, where are missing kids? If they're not in virtual school, they're not in launch ed, and they're not in the classroom, where are those kids? What's going on with those kids? We have student advocates that do that now with my team, but I think that that's one thing we're going to need to know what's going on, because we could potentially be dealing with COVID for the next several months, or even on to a year. So I think that's important, that we find out where our kids are and what's going on with them, and just being more engaging. I mean, it's not rocket science. We have to be there for our families and for our community. And it starts by reaching out to them and letting them know that we are there and we are listening.
Great, thank you. Ms. Felder, I'm going to give you a chance to respond. And again, if you would like to use that time to respond from what you wanted to previously, you are more than welcome to. What educational innovations outside of your district would you bring to your district and to Central Florida?
Okay, I just want to say this first. Michael said about more kids coming in the classroom. We can't have 30 or 40 kids in the classroom. That cannot happen. So yes, you're going to have to hire more staff, and there's going to have to be more rooms available, because with more kids coming, you cannot maintain social distance. I'm a teacher. You cannot maintain social distance like we need to with 30 kids in the class. That cannot happen. So now some of the innovative things. Walt Disney World is here, Universal is here. We have access to global learning. We are a digital district. I'd like to imagine that some of the magnet programs, like engineering magnet programs and medical magnet programs, this one is at Jones, to have students interact with people in the Silicon Valley, to interact with students maybe that are in Europe, because we have the technology to do it. And we have, Orlando is a booming business area. People have moved here for the last 30 years to work at Martin, to work at Disney, Universal. So I'd like to engage the business people to maybe come in. When I was at Edgewater 2 years ago, we had the first bank come in twice a week to teach the kids about budgeting, so we can utilize our business community. We have a plethora of business people in this city who are doing very well to engage our students in that type of learning process.
Thank you, Ms. Felder. This next question is going to be for you.
She did mention me by name, and I didn't say 30 or 40 kids in school. I'm in a classroom on a regular basis, just like Ms. Felder. I said 30 or 40 kids. This number's going up. I know how many kids are supposed to be in the classroom. I'm saying in general, if you have 30, 40 kids, the more kids you have in any given area, you're going to have to make sure that you're doing things. I mean, if I have 10 kids, I'm cleaning 2 tables. But if I have 30 kids or 40 kids, I'm going to clean probably more tables. So that's what I was talking about, just to be, it was a point of clarification. I wasn't saying putting 30 kids in the classroom.
Because you can't have that. That's impossible.
I do know that. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Ms. Felder, this question's for you. What is your stance on charter schools and school choice?
Well, charter schools are public schools that are for public education. I think that that's an innovative situation that students should be able to choose. But I think if it means taking money from public schools, that can happen. Because I think that will need to find a way to be able to budget the money in such a way that public schools will not go lacking. And if that is the case, then no, because this is a public school educational system that we have here. So I believe that students should be able to make a choice, and parents have that right to choose where they would like to have their students go to school. But if money is going to be taken from the public school system, no, I'm not in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Felder. Mr. Scott, I ask you the same question. What's your stance on charter schools and school choice?
Parents absolutely should have a choice, but public dollars belong in public schools. I can't say that again. Public dollars belong in public schools, period. But a lot of people don't know there was an alternative school years ago called CEP, Community Education Partners, and there were two of them, one in Rosemont, one in Cimarron. And so that's where the school for those children who got, level 3, level 4 suspensions or expulsions, and that was an opportunity for them to still be in a school environment, but away from, an environment where they had challenges. And they would go there for a period of time and then be able to go back. Now, CEP is still here, but it's in 3 different schools. You have Chancery, Sunshine, and Sheeler. It's the same thing, and that's the kids that don't perform or don't do as well. And guess what? Most of those kids look like me. I think charter schools are good when they serve a specific purpose. If someone is looking into maybe aviation or looking into engineering, but when it comes to just creating a school just to have one so you can make money from the state, absolutely not. Parents should absolutely have a choice for where they send their schools. And if there is a need that's not being met in the public school, because there are some things that the public schools don't meet when it comes to learning disabilities and, kids that maybe operate at a high level and want different exposure, then certainly they should have, resources to them to be able to educate the kids in the way that they believe is most prudent. But public dollars belong in public schools. It's a public school, and that's where the money should go. And that's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. This next question is for you, Mr. Scott. Districts are required to be in compliance with both Exceptional Student Education, or ESE, and the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA, regulations. Would you address, or how would you address noncompliance within the district with special education requirements?
You said a lot, man. You got to ask that question again because I was a little confused.
So our districts are required to be in compliance with both ESE and IDEA regulations, or Exceptional Student Education, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act regulations. How would you address noncompliance within the district with special education requirements?
It goes back to communication. That is the biggest thing. Some problems are solved very simply. I know there are parents right now that aren't happy because the school board either didn't respond or didn't adequately address their needs, and they were met with maybe an auto response. So for me, being available and accessible to hear what their concerns are and working with the family and the school for a solution that works for that family. Because again, what may work for a kid with a particular disability at this school may not work at another school. And granted, we don't have the resources to customize every single thing with every single kid because there are those budgetary constraints, but we definitely should try. I mean, that's the point. Again, I'm not afraid to try and fail, but I'm going to fight for these kids and these families like I've been doing. I was an ESE student. I had, a stuttering problem, still do sometimes. I'm able to talk decent to you guys now because I've been fighting for kids, and I learned to fight, for my parents fighting for me, from going into courtrooms advocating for kids that, they were trying to send to prison at 13 for minor crimes, stealing bikes and stuff. So it's important to me because I've lived it, not just only for myself, but for my son and other people's sons. So, I mean, it's a real life thing for me. So I think how we address that is having those conversations with those parents to figure out what's wrong, because if we don't know, how can we fix something? And then, coordinating with the families and the teachers to make sure that we do address their needs. We do provide them, proper education, but in a way that's respective of their rights and their circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. And Ms. Felder, I'll ask you the same question. How would you address noncompliance within the district with special education requirements?
Well, one of the things we offer in the district is professional development. You may have some teachers who have just come in and they may come from another county and they may not do things the same way that we do it in Orange County. We are extremely, we do well with providing all kinds of professional development for teachers and even for certificate renewal. We have fiddlers, we have all kinds of programs that will allow teachers to be able to take some classes, participate in workshops to teach them about compliance. When school opens, we have teachers from the ESC department, staff develop, our staffing specialists come in and explain to us the importance of non-compliant. The way you fix is to educate people that you have to be compliant. And if you don't know what that means, and then we give you professional development so you can understand, so you'll know that it's important that these children have rights and you have to be compliant. If you don't understand, teaching, educating you will help you get a better understanding. And I can say about Orange County, we have that down. We got that. We do well with that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Felder. Now, we have gotten to the last question of this evening, and we at the Commission on Local Debates do something special with this last question. Nobody knows the campaign trail more than yourselves and the issues facing the community like yourselves. So now each of you will have 30 seconds to ask your opponent one question. We will start with you, Ms. Felder. You have 30 seconds to ask Mr. Scott, your opponent, one question for this evening.
Okay, Michael. Let's see what I want to ask you. How would you address District 5 if there is a problem with some of the students and the parents who are afraid to even send their children back to school, but they have to go to work? What would be some alternatives that you would suggest to them? And would you be accessible?
Thank you, Ms. Felder. Mr. Scott, you have your time to answer the question.
I'm doing it right now. Miss Vicky, Diva. Guys, I love Miss Vicky. She definitely contributes to our community. We're great friends and colleagues. But I will tell you, for me, the learning pods, we have parents who recognize they have jobs and can't take the kids to school, but need a safe place for them to send their kids off so that they can be educated and not play Fortnite or video games at home. And so we have learning pods set up in most all of our community centers across the city. And, you know, we check on our kids. I got kids at different schools and, you know, outside of the groups and lessons and sessions that we teach, hey, how's everything going? Well, why are you on Fortnite? Okay, why are you on Call of Duty? Checking in. So for me, I'm doing it. I'm talking with the kids at the learning pods, and I'm talking with the parents about what's going on at home and also what I'm seeing with the kids that I work with. So that's how I would address that, is creating a safe environment outside of the school, but a place that's comfortable. We can even potentially use some churches, but that's how I'd address it, Ms. Felder.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Scott, you have 30 seconds now to ask Ms. Felder a question of your choice.
Ms. Felder, so we talk about this a lot in debates and in, you know, our professional conversations outside. How would you deal with a kid who is afraid of the police? At 19 years old, I had a gun held to my head, and I remember it to this very day. And I shared that story with a lot of people to the point where I'm not comfortable sharing, you know, who the officer was, because that officer is now an elected sheriff in another county in Central Florida. But that changed the way that I view law enforcement. And while I respect them, I am cautious of the police at 30 years old, having been in the military 11 years. So how would you address a kid who was afraid of the police? What would you do to coach them through that?
That's a very good question, Michael. Thank you for asking me that question. One of the things, and I've already addressed that when I was doing face-to-face, I would explain to each of my classes. I had was planning with my sorority, with our young men's group. We had police officers come in and to show them how you respond if you're stopping. So I go through that with my students. I had SROs come in, and I tell them even now, when you're stopped by the police, the first thing you do, first thing, you're polite. If you're driving, I said, when you're driving at night, always have your license and everything right in front of you. And when you get stopped, put your hands on the steering wheel. So when you talk to them and explain to them and let them know, do not, the first thing you want to do is not to get on the defensive. You're polite. Yes, sir. No, sir. May I make a phone call? And that's when you call your parents. But by all means, you are to always be polite. And then I want them to also know that all police officers are not the same. And I've even on some occasions encouraged some of them to go into law enforcement. Why? Because I used to hate police officers until as I got older into the adult years, most of my friends became police officers. So I had to change that tune. So yes, I would educate them and let them know that this is how you respond when you are stopped. That's a very good question. Thank you.
Thank you both. And now we will finish up with giving you both 2 minutes to again close out your arguments for the evening, remind the voters a little bit about yourselves, and again, give your finishing statement. So Mr. Scott, we will begin with you.
I thank you guys for your time, for watching us. I hope we have been informative, but also entertaining. Me and my opponent are in the trenches. You know, we are in the schools every day fighting for the kids. But when you talk about your Orange County School Board, anyone from any background believes that, you know, our community and the people that represent us should be diverse and reflective of the communities that they represent. Right now, the Orange County School Board does not represent the entire community. It doesn't have the perspective of a young person. I'm 38, a young man, but certainly never had the perspective of a young Black man. I've worked tirelessly for kids because I believed in it. I've had a full-time job and in the past 15 years started a successful nonprofit that helped kids and families overcome the barriers and challenges that wouldn't allow them to be successful, not because I was paid. If you ask someone would they do a particular job without money, a lot of them will be like, yeah, I need to get paid. I'm gonna do this work regardless of any outcome because I believe in it. I believe that it's the calling on my life. And it's not something I sought to do. I wanted to join the military and be a cop and you know, do those things. But God had other plans for me. So I would hope that you will elect me knowing that I'm going to fight for you every day as I have done for the past 15 years of my life. And I will fight for you just as I would fight for my own kids because, you know, I live in this community, I'm from this community, and it is a purpose on my life to be able to serve. My opponent, while qualified, I believe just wants to be elected. She ran for city commission and was going to run for city commission before. I think this is an opportunity for her to be elected. I've run 3 times, and you know I'm vested. I'm very vested in seeing these kids succeed and their families be well cared for. So thank you for your time, and I hope you'll vote for Mike Scott on November 3rd. Absentee ballots are in the mail.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, and thank you especially for that message to voters about absentee ballots. Ms. Felder, we will end with you. Your time now to close out your final arguments.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank you all for the invitation, and it was indeed a pleasure to debate with Mr. Scott. I am a lifelong resident of Washington Shores, and I still live in Washington Shores. I was raised in Washington Shores. And my mother was an educator. My father was a businessman. My elementary school, my junior high school, and my high school, all 3 of those schools are within District 5. I have a good understanding of the needs of this district. I've been an educator for 40 years, and a teacher's work does not stop at 2:20. It doesn't stop at 3 o'clock. It goes over in the weekend. Sometimes it goes over at night. And sometimes a teacher becomes a doctor, becomes a psychologist, becomes a social worker, and a teacher, a minister. I've done all of that. And I think that I am the most qualified candidate because of the investment and the time that I put in this district as an educator. And not only as an educator, but as a person who lives and who was raised in Orlando. I call it beautiful Washington Shores. And I have a working relationship with parents the community. They trust me, the students that I've taught for some over 40 years. So I believe I bring an interesting and a broad perspective to the board. Yes, I am a woman, and there are some young women on the board. I'm not one of the young women, but I am an innovative, energetic woman, and I will bring a different and a diversified perspective to that board. So I do want you to know that the absentee ballots are out. When you go to the polls to vote on November 3rd, remember the 2 V's. Vote Vicki, the educator. Thank you.
Thank you both. And there is no doubt in my mind either of your commitment to the community. And on behalf of the viewers and the voters, we would like to say thank you so much. It has been a pleasure moderating with both of you. I wish you both best of luck up to Election Day and even afterwards. So thank you very much. And this video will be available on Facebook and YouTube. So make sure to spread it around to all of your friends and family members and get everybody educated on what the school board does and prepared for this November election. So
yes, thank you.
Thank you both.